At precisely 5:15 a.m. on September 8, 2025, the quiet along Ukraine's eastern border was broken. Russia launched a titanic attack unlike any seen in months. 320 drones, 70 tanks, 30 minesweepers, and more than 1,200 top troops spilling across the Donetsk-Luhansk border in a remorseless pincer attack. The rumble of engines shook the ground, and the sky darkened with clouds of drones. For Moscow, this was supposed to be the storm of opportunity, quick, crushing, unbeatable. Civilian villagers in the vicinity could feel the earth shake under their feet, as though the war itself were devouring the ground. But Russia had no idea that Ukraine was not the country it had attempted to smash at the beginning of the war. With General Alexander Syrsky leading, Ukraine had been toughened, hardened, and had marshaled a comeback that would turn confidence into tragedy. The dawn sky was ripped by the first wave of drones, 120 designed to blind radars, 100 carrying incendiary fire intended to fire up fuel tanks, and another 100 kamikaze drones with high explosives, each attack intended to disable Ukraine's capacity for resistance. The earth trembled more violently as armor mine clearers burst ahead, blowing in concealed charges, making way for a tank spearhead. 3,500 tons of steel rolling toward Ukrainian positions, their guns poised to destroy all in front. Behind them came 1,200 of Russia's most highly trained troops, grim and resolute, sure this conflict would conclude with Ukraine defeated. Moscow had thrown more than $1.2 billion worth of firepower into a single front in a single morning, assuming no defense could stand. But behind the smoke, the thunder, and the absolute tonnage of metal, Ukraine had laid a trap. One Russia did not anticipate. If you were the Ukrainian commander who was confronted by 70 tanks and over 300 drones, would you retaliate immediately or wait for the ideal moment? Tell me in the comments. When the Russian armored column advanced into Ukraine, General Alexander Syrsky, battle-hardened and unruffled, instructed his troops to stand fast and allow the enemy to advance into a forearmed killing zone. 60 high-yield anti-tank mines lay buried under fields outside Bakhmut, and all were connected to a single manual detonator, each able to dismember a 50-ton tank. Troops waited, fingers poised, eyes on the onrushing steel, and at 5:42 a.m. the lead tanks moved into the ambush until catastrophe. A 45-ton mine-clearing tank squashed the center charges and initiated the explosives too early. Fireballs burst upward, shockwaves shattered windows miles distant, and 14 Russian tanks were destroyed, but the timing of the ambush was lost in 10 seconds. Panic spread among the defenders. The stroke intended to destroy the spearhead had been wasted too soon, and the line appeared ready to collapse. Nevertheless, Syrsky did not falter. He commanded his men to hold, to make the invaders think that the attack had succeeded, then strike at them where they least anticipated. In minutes he unleashed Ukraine's secret, a cloud of 200 special drones with reinforced nets meant to entangle Russian UAVs. The sky in the morning became a crazy hunt. Ukrainian nets snatched more than 70 Russian drones, pulling them down like captured prey within an invisible web, as ground batteries roared into life and the fight became a deadly, unpredictable ballet. 6-barrel Gatling gun rose thundered to life, firing at 6,000 rounds a minute and tearing burning trails across the sky as Russian drones were torn apart in midair. Yet, 3 managed to get through, hitting a Ukrainian forward base, injuring 5 soldiers and setting up supply trucks ablaze in a blaze that sent smoke twirling into the dawn. Evidence that even slight breaches cut deep. General Syrsky responded with anger, releasing 250 kamikaze drones and 100 bombing UAVs designed to crash into Russian armor. The result was devastating. 27 tanks destroyed in a matter of minutes, turrets flung into the air, and infantry units dispersed as blasts ripped their lines apart. Russian soldiers fired wildly into the air in desperation, expending ammunition, and others clung to blazing vehicles, refusing to fall back even when Ukrainian armor let loose from the flanks. At 6:10 a.m., as much as 40% of Russia's frontline armor had been destroyed. This potentially brilliant offensive was dissolving into desperation, yet still Syrsky advanced. From twin forests, Ukrainian T-64 and T-72 tanks emerged into the open, their NATO-provided shells pounding Russian armor stuck in the kill zone. 19 more tanks were destroyed in 7 minutes, some blowing up in fireballs so intense that turrets weighing tons were hurled hundreds of feet away. Black pillars of smoke marked each wreckage as survivors reported the ground itself trembling with each blast. Russia returned fire, pouring out more than 500 rounds in 15 minutes, but it was blind fire that wasted largely. Ukrainian crews moved position with great accuracy and replied with lethal precision. Infantrymen once advancing with confidence now ran for ditches, barns, and craters, some of them able to disable 2 Ukrainian vehicles before being cut down by machine gun squads and armored carriers. By 6:35 a.m., the battlefield was anarchy. Of the 70 Russian tanks, less than 25 were left, their tracks blown and fuel low. More than 400 men were killed or wounded in less than an hour. The great offensive had turned into a nightmare of charred steel and broken men. But, amidst the ruin, isolated pockets of resistance clung to farmhouses and tree lanes, fighting with fanatical courage. By 6:50 a.m., what was once a juggernaut had been broken into pieces, a graveyard of armor on the Donetsk steppe. Yet General Syrskyi was far from done. To put an end to it once and for all, Ukraine sent out reconnaissance UAVs with strike charges, their cameras revealing shocking sights. Russian units shattered into groups of fewer than a dozen, some bearing their wounded, all scrambling to flee the massacre. Others held useless rifles, their rounds expended, as Ukrainian kamikaze drones descended upon trenches and barns with precise accuracy, killing at least 150 troops within the space of less than 20 minutes. Panic gripped them. One drone feed showed a conscript tossing away his rifle, throwing up his hands, and pleading for his life on screen. A frightening image of contemporary war where surrender could be watched in real time. There were some, however, who would not give up, firing into the air until their final shot, and 30 who took cover in a burned-out farmhouse fought back for almost 40 minutes before artillery turned the house to splinters. UAVs that couldn't deliver direct hits transmitted coordinates to ground troops, who directed groups of Ukrainian soldiers on motorbikes with rifles and grenade launchers, surrounding the remaining pockets and causing dozens to surrender. Over 300 Russian soldiers had been taken captive by noon, their guns strewn about in the ground. The devastation. Fewer than 20 tanks still existed, most of them left behind, while more than 800 Russian soldiers were dead or wounded. Ukraine's loss was real but relatively minimal, below 20 dead, 5 severely injured. Above Donetsk, a haze of smoke as Russia's massive push, 320 drones, 70 tanks, 30 mine clearers, and 1,200 top troops, was broken. A self-inflicted minefield explosion might have spelled disaster, but under General Alexander Syrskyi, Ukraine improvised, throwing back innovation. Netcasting drones, Gatling guns, kamikaze UAV swarms, and a well-timed tank ambush. Survivors who attempted to flee were hunted down by drones and motorcycle-borne troops, sealing the outcome. The lesson was incontrovertible. War isn't won by numbers alone, by flexibility, creativity, and leadership. September 8th was a day of shame for Moscow. Its brigade dwindled to smoldering ruins and shattered morale, while for Ukraine it demonstrated that courage and strategy can overwhelm raw power. If you appreciate these unheralded histories of contemporary warfare, consider supporting our channel by subscribing and sharing, so the world will not forget fights like this.